Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 6. We will be talking about chapters 18 through 21 of The Way of Kings. Paul, what are your 2 words to summarize these chapters?
All right, this for these chapters, I have chivalry and confusion.
Chivalry, confusion. Eliot?
So mine are actually rather similar to that. I have sacrifice and madness.
Sacrifice, madness, chivalry, and confusion. That's a very nice spread. Let's discuss these. All right, to start this one, Paul, tell me about chivalry specifically, and then we'll jump to Eliot's. What was your first word?
Sacrifice.
We'll talk about chivalry and then sacrifice. See if they're similar.
So chivalry, I thought of with the Dalinar chapter, where he's fighting these midnight essence, and he's put into this weird. Is this reality? Is this a dream situation? It was moderately confusing, but whether or not it's real, he even mentions that it's not real. He's still very chivalrous and is basically fighting with the intention of even losing his life for these people he does, for these citizens, and it's a very chivalrous thing to do.
Okay, Eliot, sacrifice.
Along the same lines, I thought of Dalinar in the vision that he's in the past, and how he just throws himself in self-sacrifice without even thinking. He even has a moment where he's having that I'm dreaming moment of this isn't real, I don't have to do this, but his honor won't let him not jump in and just throw himself in between this woman and this girl to save them from the beast, the midnight essence or whatever. I have a lot of questions about those, by the way. And then also in the Kaladin chapter, Kaladin has to find out a way to sacrifice his own food or other people's food or their time to try and save these wounded bridgemen.
I'm really glad that both of you picked up on that Dalinar moment, which I'll bring it up in a quote later, but I love that moment so much. Paul, what was your second word?
It was confusion.
Okay, who's confused?
It was mostly with Sylphrena.
Okay.
In the last chapter we'll talk about. I don't want to get into it too much because I'll touch on it a lot later. It's one of my favorite moments, but the whole concept, she touches on a lot of deep things. Why do men lie?
Mm-hmm.
And such. And so it's a lot of confusing topics that are hard to give answers to. A lot of big questions. But so that was the main reason I chose confusion.
Confusion and madness. Eliot, what does this mean?
So I thought my madness might be tied to your confusion, but I was going in a slightly different direction. We have the madness that Dalinar exhibits when he goes under this state, when the high storm rolls in and he's taken over by this madness. And then also just the very entertaining conversation between Kaladin and Syl about madness, in which Kaladin walks away from that conversation saying, Syl, me talking to you, who no one else can see, really doesn't do anything for my image of being mad, which I thought was pretty funny. So I tied the madness to those two.
Good. Not everyone can't see her. Rock can, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and you don't.
Yes.
Big moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was. That's gonna be a great thing to talk about.
We'll get to it. All right. Before we really dive into this, I want to do a spell check, and this one is going to be very fun for me. So, so the first one is not that bad. It's It comes from chapter 20. No, sorry, chapter 19, and it's from these shard bearers discussing where they're from. And Elliot, could you try to pronounce this word for me, where the shard bearers are from?
So I'm hoping that I'm picking the right word here, but I'm sure you'll be able to tell once I give it a try.
It starts with a U.
Okay. Yep.
It does. Oh, man.
Spoilers.
Oh, come on.
So for this word, another almost palindrome, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
but I read this as Urithiru.
Okay.
Urithiru.
All right. So with this new knowledge that I've just leaked for you, Paul, how would you like to spell this word?
Okay, so should I say what I had before?
Yeah. Well, say what they
It
say.
really doesn't change anything.
Say what they say in the audiobook, and then you can explain your reasoning for the
Okay.
spelling.
If I remember correct, it's Urithiru.
Urithiru is how they say it.
Urithiru. I'm a Thiru.
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
Yep.
I had Yurethiru, but I'm guessing there's no Y at the beginning that it starts with a U. That was my best guess on Urithiru.
I don't have it in front of me, but I think I can spell it from memory because it's literally a palindrome with a TH in the middle. It's Urithiru.
Oh, wow.
Urithiru.
Yep. That was close.
Yeah.
But not
Okay.
quite.
So
Which is bad news because I'm not going to be anywhere close on this second one.
Not terrible, but
I've got it perfect. Don't
I
worry.
am fully expecting both
Oh,
of you
that's
to nail this one. All right. At the end of chapter 21, Rock, who everyone's been calling him Rock, he explains to Kaladin and Teft that Rock is not his actual name, and his real name is Eliot.
Oh gosh. The moment I read this as I was reading chapter 21, it's the last chapter we're reading. It's the last paragraph of the chapter. As soon as I came across it, I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna have to say that name. There's no way I'm getting out of that." Okay, here we go. It's some 30 letters long, but here it comes. Numu huku makiaki aya lunamore. Don't ask me to say that again.
That is phenomenal.
That was good.
Paul, how do they say it? If you can say it.
Say it that well. I think he did better than I can because I wrote down what I best heard,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried 4 times to listen to it, and I still couldn't. I mean, I even tried it on half speed. I turned the audiobook down to the slowest it could go, and I'm still lost. So I actually think
Paul,
Elliot's probably gonna do better.
I have all faith in you as a speller. I know you are competent and very skilled, but there is no way in the entire world that you are spelling this correctly.
It's just spelled how it sounds. Just go for it.
Yeah. So it's what? Numahumumakala. Numahumalakamaki Lunamore, right? And so I had, all right, I can't even. Oh man! So I wrote it in this little notebook, and it fills up an entire line. I ran out of space.
How many letters? How many letters do you have? I regret this question.
I think I actually had 30, right at 30.
Okay, I believe there are 25 in the book. If you want to,
I probably added some extra letters in there. Honestly,
just go for it.
What's your spelling?
Numuhu This is where I get Mulakamak wait, is that an I? MAKIAINALUNAMOR.
Okay.
I probably lost track there.
No, I think
Not that bad.
you're
honestly.
Does
you're
it
You only
end
got
with
75%
MOR?
of the letters.
you're probably 80% right. Yeah. So here's how you.
Does it end
Yeah.
with an MOR?
It does.
Just like cuts off. Okay, because that was my big ambitious. I bet it just cuts off at the R. You know.
So here's how they spell it.
I don't do no more.
NUMUHUKUMAKIAKI apostrophe AIALUNAMOR.
Apostrophe. Wow, they really went all out. They went all out on that.
Just
Numu
because.
Numuhunu Kumakia Ika Lunamore. Whew!
Nice.
I actually love it. So much.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with rock.
Rock. Yep. Good.
I'll get it down. I'm gonna get it down. I'm gonna practice. Going into next episode, I'm only referring to him as Numa Huma Luca Numa Lunamore.
So one of my favorite parts about this whole thing is actually that Michael Kramer doesn't skip a beat. He even just goes straight into it and doesn't take a second. It might be editing of the audiobook, obviously, but he just shoots it off immediately, and you're like, what?
I felt really confident. We've had all these big names, and I at least feel confident saying them. Even like the name of their deity, it was like Elithanathile. I thought that was enormous. I was like, I've got it. I'm so good at this. And then this one just put me in my place. It just said no, sir.
What a name. What a name.
All right,
Yeah.
good work, gentlemen. Could have been a lot worse than it was.
That's got to be the worst one.
You hope.
I predict of the whole series. I'm gonna say this has got to be the worst one ever, or at
I
least
hope so.
longest. At least longest.
What if you meet more horn eaters?
Good point. Good point. I mean, maybe he has a long name even for his culture.
It's possible. It's possible.
We'll see. We'll see.
All right.
But yeah,
Let's rewind a little bit and talk about chapter 18. I really enjoy chapter 18 because it gives a lot of depth to Alethi culture. It gives a lot of good insight to how Dalinar thinks about things, to how Adolin thinks about things, and how they talk with Elokar, and they're investigating the saddle girth, the saddle strap, and it gives a lot of good dynamics here. Paul, go ahead and pull up that picture that I put in the Discord for you. I will put it on screen for our viewers. This picture is at the beginning of chapter 18 for me, although Elliot, you said that it was at the end of 21 for you?
Beginning of 21.
Beginning of 21? Okay. So
We'll check.
it's
beginning of 21.
okay, it's in different places in the book, but both of those chapters are in this section. It's supposed to be a rough sketch of the war camps, and I really enjoyed this picture. I didn't get this until my third read of the entire series because I listened to the audiobook for the first two, and this picture is really helpful for it, or at least it was for me, to kind of envision the war camps and Elokar's castles on the top of the hill there, as you can see, and it's a really good visual that I wanted the audio reader to see. Thoughts, Paul?
it is cool. I was reading all the names and stuff on there. There's a bunch of names it lists, and it lists it right to left as was it Rohan, Sadius, Eladar, Dalinar, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of see the specific ones, and so I'm assuming this is like the Shattered Plains.
Yep.
Is that right?
So this is
so I imagine they're running these bridges to like fill these gaps.
Yep.
Is basically what's happening and stuff? So that is a good depiction. You can kind of see, like realistically.
So yeah, so they've got a bunch of lookouts looking for the chasm fiends who are pupating, and then as soon as they see them, all the high princes race, like they all run out on their own plateaus to go try to find the.
You just hope it's closest to yours, you know.
Correct. It's this grand game that they've been creating, which Dalinar doesn't like, which we can talk about in chapter 18. Well, first of all, it starts with Adolin and this saddle girth strap, and he brings it to two leather workers, and they both agree that it's been cut, but they both automatically assume that it was sliced by
accidentally.
By accident, by a grieve brushing the strap, or it's in storage and somebody brushed it and it accidentally sliced it. They both assume that it's an accident that happens every day, but Elokar is convinced that we've already heard him say this probably 4 or 5 times since they found it, that he's convinced that somebody's trying to kill him. Any hypotheses on this?
There's definitely every conversation, every time that we've talked with Elokar, he talks about this strap. It's basically anytime Dalinar or whoever goes up to talk to him, he's like, "What have you learned about my strap? What have you learned?" And it talks about how he's almost obsessed with the idea that someone's trying to kill him or like assassinate him, not necessarily an outright, but that there's someone like conniving in the background. And I can't tell if it's really paranoia. I fully believe, I mean, after the leather workers said that seems cut, I mean, I feel pretty confident that someone maybe was trying to kill him and we don't know who yet. And they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids, you know? But
I think Adolin points out, though, or somebody does it at some point, though, that that's not the best way to try and assassinate someone. That was a pretty incompetent assassination attempt, if it was, which kind of makes me lean towards the fact that this was an accident, but I don't know.
I thought about that, but I also feel this is like the safest way, right? If you assassinate someone, I don't know, maybe they could see where you were that night and such. It's a lot easier to investigate. But with this, it's like, oh, he fell off his horse like while fighting this chasm fiend, and everyone's just like, oh, the chasm fiend killed him, you know?
Right.
And so it's like less risk involved. Was my thought on that.
Okay, so final verdict: kill attempt? Yes, no?
I think yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna go with no. I think it was
no.
I think it was no.
Okay. And we'll refer to this clip later. All right. Let's talk about Vorin culture and the Alethi. Adolin is talking with his mentor, his Vorin mentor. What's the word?
They're Ardent.
Thank you, Ardent. And he's kind of his religious father figure, if you will. And he's talking to him about Dalinar, and if the Almighty would send these visions that Dalinar is getting. And he doesn't give him a straight answer. He goes into the history of the old Vorin church, how there was mysticism and they tried to take over the world. Oopsies. And he gives him a straight answer that says the Almighty probably wouldn't send these visions. And I think this is a product of Dalinar's mind, Dalinar's old war self kind of coming out, and he is like maybe has sins in his past that he's trying to reconcile with himself or something. And that's the only real clear answer Adolin gets from him. And I also want to highlight that Adolin doesn't know any of this. he knows of it, but he's not very well versed in it. He's very much focused on his dueling, which is his calling. However, he doesn't know the history, like the in-depth histories of the Vorin Church. He's 20, I believe he's 26, and he's being taught basic history. And it kind of highlights the Alethi mindset of, yeah, I appreciate religion as long as it doesn't get in the way of my partying. Of, I'm going to go on all these bridge runs and collect wealth and glory for the Almighty, sure, but that's not really why I'm here. I'm here for me. I'm here for the glory for myself. And I want to highlight that for you guys, that I didn't pick that up on my first one, and I think it's an interesting dynamic that the Alethi aren't very committed to the Vorin religion.
It's interesting. It's almost as a necessity rather than an actual desire that they have to do these things for the Almighty,
Right.
as they say.
There's even a comment, the girl that Adolin is with, is her name pronounced Yanala with another
Correct.
J on the beginning
Yes,
of it?
it's
Yes. You should
Yanala
have done that
with a
as
J.
the spell check.
It's the same as Yasna, though. It's basically it's Yanala with it, and it's spelled with a J. Paul.
I would have spelled it with a way, a Y.
A way.
I just mixed Y and J there together with a way. Yeah.
All right, I'm learning. I'm learning about the pronunciation now. So
Yeah.
so Yanala makes a comment though, to that exact point that you're saying, as they walk into the church or whatever they call it, where they're in. She's like, "Oh, you brought me to a church? I mean, come on, man. This is boring. This is terrible. Why are we here?"
Right.
That totally fits with what you're describing, as they kind of view it as a, oh yeah, religion. Forgot about that.
Right. And his mentor, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll look at it here in a second. But his mentor mentions to him as he's leaving that it's been a while since he's ascended in his calling. And I want to juxtapose that with Shallan. In the few chapters we've seen Shallan, she is very deliberate in remembering to write a prayer or remembering to thank the heralds as she's kind of gone about her couple days in Kharbranth that we've seen. She takes her religion very seriously, and Adolin and a lot of the Alethi culture do not. So that's the difference between Yakaved, where Shallan is from, and Alethkar, where the Kholins are from.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I keep forgetting that Shallan is not Alethi. I keep kind of categorizing her in this same bucket as the rest of them, but she's not. She's from Yakaved, which is a totally different nation. So I got to keep remembering that.
If this helps visually for painting a picture in your mind for you, Shallan is very white, and the Alethi are very tan. They have
they've mentioned that a couple times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Alethi are they're almost different races, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't it describe Shallan, looking back, as like real pale with like red hair?
Yep.
Kind of, and
yeah,
she really stood out for that. So I've actually always had that mental picture, and it helped me a lot. Whatever they did back in the Shallan chapters.
I always pictured it. Shallan was from Scotland, and the Alethi were from the Middle East. That's how I thought about it.
I always thought of the main protagonist from Brave.
Oh yes, Merida.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's an interesting, like, point about the Vorin religion in this. Also about Dalinar and such. So we talked a little bit last episode about his interest in the book The Way of Kings, and how it kind of makes him an outlier, especially amongst his colleagues who don't value the book highly. But we have I think really cool. We have our first mention of Noadon We
Yes, we
finally know
learned
who he
something
is,
about
right?
Noadon.
We did, and yeah, didn't it say that he wrote The Way of Kings?
Yeah,
He did. So we're following an author.
Yep.
He wrote the book we're reading, you know? Kind of. He wrote the book that
he,
we're reading about people reading.
exactly.
Yes. Yes, we're reading about him who wrote a book that we're reading about people reading.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that's right.
All right. So I wanna highlight y'all's predictions of who Noadon was. Let's back up a little bit there. Elliot, you said he was a knowledge spren. Do you
Yes.
do you wish to read? Do you wish to change this at all?
I should point out that this is not completely disproven yet. We don't know that knowledge spread can't write books,
Okay.
but yes, I probably should update my prediction of who Noadon is. I got super excited when I saw Noadon, and instead of just kind of a name drop, we finally get something to attribute to him, something we've learned about him. He's the author of Way of Kings. But we've gotten a few hints, I think, from Dalinar about this book, The Way of Kings. He's mentioned a couple times that I think you mentioned this last episode, that The Way of Kings is not viewed very positively right now in Alethi culture. It's very counter to the way Alethi culture is nowadays. So I'm guessing that he's not maybe the most popular figure, that he maybe is a little bit of an outlier. And I may even go out on a limb. There was the quote that I read last episode from The Way of Kings, which talked a lot about servant leadership, and how the talked about the weight that the king carries, and the king can step down from his pedestal to help the working person with their load, and maybe that would open people's eyes to the need for helping the king, or whatever that looks like. I wonder if Nodon was a king, if he knows so much about this. Was he in those shoes? I'm gonna, I think, adjust my prediction to say that Noadon is a king of some kind.
Okay. Paul, you said that he was an important guy. That was your prediction. Would you like to?
And I think we're right. I think I was right on the head with that one.
Okay.
He
I
wrote The
think
Way of Kings, which, although it's a little old-fashioned, it's still a very important book, and someone that we look to as highly as Dalinar has decided to live by it. So I would say Noadon is a pretty important person, you know?
Okay.
Um, but kind of a serious prediction. I really like the King prediction. I never thought that maybe he was an old ruler or someone with a ton of power, but a lot of the teachings in the Way of Kings are that of like humility and such, and so maybe I think he was a more simple man, kind of just a wise guy, like a monk type almost. Maybe not full on like having no possessions and or something, but um, you know, an older figure who
Maybe
is
a
very
maybe a servant leader, perhaps.
perhaps a servant leader with servant leadership.
servant leader.
Servant leadership.
Hmm. I could very well see that.
Something before we completely move on from the Way of Kings and figuring out Noadon wrote it. I want to highlight that. I want to highlight that Yasna has read Noadon. Shalon has read Noadon,
I
and
did remember
Paul and Elliot, you're not wrong that he's not very or the Way of Kings isn't very popular with the Alethi, and I want to circle back to this thought that Shalon is devout in the Vorin culture, in Vorin, in the Vorin religion, and the Alethi are not. So, the Way of Kings is very much about servant leadership so much as we've seen, and the Alethi are not a fan of that. So I just want to highlight that.
also one thing I wanted to kind of mention. So Elliot was saying that so because Dalinar um kind of lives by the way of kings and such, it makes him less popular, I guess, in his group. So he's even kind of blown off in some, or people are beginning to think that maybe he's gone mad or crazy and stuff. He does this and he has these like visions that are seem really bizarre. People are thinking he's kind of losing his mind, and he's always been revered as this very great general, and like excellent ally to the kingdom. And we even see later on, you mentioned like how he wasn't popular, but everyone seems to know. And like at the end of like in chapter 21, they mentioned that Syl actually knows who he was. Syl mentioned that she heard the
Still knows who Dalinar is.
yes.
Right.
Syl mentioned that she'd heard like the bridge crew members speaking of him and such. So he is still incredibly well known. But unfortunately, I guess in the upper um, diplomatic positions and such, people are starting to think less highly of him, I guess, or at least be wary.
Yeah. And even in our previous episode, I believe it was chapter 16, Laurel is talking to Kaladin about the Blackthorn. Even in far off Hearthstone, in rural Hearthstone, Laurel knows about the Blackthorn and King Gavilar. That's how well known Dalinar is.
Still, with Dalinar though, one of my words being chivalry. So I think one of the coolest chapters um, was this in chapter 19. So I alluded to Dalinar's visions. And this is a weird kind of playing with the boundary between reality and a dream. In that Dalinar has this dream that he can control what he's doing and he knows what's happening, but he's almost in someone else's body, or people see him. In this case, it's with a family, and it seems like he's the father or husband to this woman. Um, but he just knows he doesn't even know her name or who he has taken over their name or the daughter's name or anything. He's really lost, but he's fully conscious, I guess, as Dalinar, and even in this weird dream, we still see his chivalry and uh, heroic acts play out. So even though that Dalinar is in this dream, he's fighting these midnight essences. Kind of weird, really weird depiction. These just like kind of ghost like smoke demons. It was really weird. One thing I must say, as far as I can remember, it's the first creature depiction that wasn't aquatic. It wasn't a crab. It wasn't a lobster or anything. It was totally different. So I thought the imagery was really cool, and we even see whenever one of them is stabbed that like smoke kind of like emits from wherever the gash was.
Right. It's a good point, Paul. Your observation. The Midnight Essence are very much not of Roshar. Roshar is very underwater crab like we've established, and these Midnight Essence are not like anything we've seen, and not like anything Dalinar has seen, which is more impressive because Dalinar is taken aback by these things, and he's been in Roshar his whole life.
Yeah, it was very obvious that we were in some kind of weird alternate, is this real life situation, or or is this all figments of my imagination? What the heck is happening here?
Yeah, the Essence almost seemed to not even make sense. Like it was confusing and
Right.
very different. Yeah, I got that vibe too.
I do want to read a couple quotes about the Midnight Essence, but also about Dalinar. Um, I might call these my Dalinar moments because I'm enjoying highlighting Dalinar moments. Dalinar cursed himself for a fool, raising one hand to his side to staunch the blood. He knew, logically, that he was really back in the barrack with Renarin. This was all happening in his mind. There was no need for him to fight, but every instinct, every shred of honor he had, drove him to step to the side, placing himself between the woman and the beasts. Vision, memory, or delusion, he could not stand aside. A couple pages later, he glanced down at his arm, pulling off his makeshift bandage. He had to wipe free blood and some torn skin, but underneath, the skin was perfectly healed. He took a few deep breaths, then shrugged, picked up his poker, and joined the fight. That second one was after the shard bearers showed up, and I just wanted to highlight the mental image that I get there. He's so shocked that he just got healed from this shard bearer, and he kind of looks around, brushes off the dead skin, shrugs, picks up the fire poker, and runs into the battle. Like, it's so funny to me that he's just like, there's literally no other option except to help fight, even though I was just almost dead 2 seconds ago. Like, it's such a funny moment to me.
Joke. I thought that was incredible, and also I thought that the showcase of these older shard bearers was really, really notable and incredible. That was, I think, probably the most taking part of this episode, and or at least what makes me the most curious in this chapter, is who were these people? I bet these are some cool people we'll learn more about down the line, or at least in some way, because she had the female shard bearer had the power to heal Dalinar, right?
Yep.
Something I haven't seen thus far.
So
in several other things, but
they introduce themselves after they've rescued them from the Midnight Essence, and the female shard bearer heals Dalinar. They introduce themselves as the Knights Radiant, and they say they're from Urithiru, which is where our spelling bee from earlier came from. And in this very short scene that we get, the Knights Radiant can fly or /fall from the sky. They have glowing armor and or can remove their helmets at will. That was an odd specific image that Dalinar had in his mind, and they can heal. So the Knights Radiant are very interesting in this vision, to say the least.
The word that came to my mind was superpowered. The shard bearers that we've seen so far are a whole level above your normal soldiers, and now these old time shard bearers are even a step up from that. That's even more powerful than the shard bearers we've seen so far, which they did some cool stuff. I did think one of the descriptions, which you kind of mentioned there, was they described them as falling from the sky, but then the one shard bearer launches up off the ground, up across the valley or wherever they're at,
Right.
and he's described as launching as if he was falling up. And that made me think back to the prologue with Zeth and the lashings that he did.
I was gonna highlight this if you didn't.
Yeah, because that's how they described the lashings. Was Zeth can change gravity, basically. He can make gravity pull him up to the roof. Is that the same thing that's happening here with these shard bearers? It kind of sounded like it.
Perhaps. Yes, they have. Dalinar has used a shard blade, which is magical, and shard plate his entire life, and he is not making sense of what is happening. Like, he's been around what he assumes to be, mythological or whatever, but even when he's seeing these things, he is not making sense of it. He has not seen this before. I want to read another quote here. Paul, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to talk about how, so we see this extremely cool imagery, and also we see kind of a reward, because it's in the quote that Trevor read earlier. Dalinar's like vision or reality or like dream, whatever. I can't stand by, and he defends this family there, and helps fight off these midnight essence. And at the end, he finds out some like valuable information almost, and I think that if he didn't do that, then maybe he wouldn't have found that out. And so it's really weird. I don't know why he's being shown this or like how valuable this information is and such, but it's really interesting. But it's almost like a reward for his chivalry, even while he's sleeping.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Paul. That's really cool. And the the we got a couple hints. We got a couple just little nuggets of information about who this person is that talks to him through the voice of the woman that he or through the person of the woman. I guess it's a different voice. But yeah, it's almost a reward for his valiance, his honor. We get a couple nuggets, one of which is the guy says, "I miss these times," which makes me wonder if this person who's speaking to him is from this old this time in the past history. And then he, as he's talking to him, he mentions a couple times stuff like to mention that is forbidden or something like that. It's like he's adhering to a specific set of rules, which makes me think of like time travel in a lot of fictional stories and worlds. Time, any kind of time travel tends to come with a lot of rules. And so, is this person somehow communicating with him across time? Is this someone from the past communicating to him in the future, or the opposite? Is this someone in the future communicating to Dalinar in the past? I don't know. It's got me scratching my head.
He does get a few nuggets of information. One from the voice he's heard in these recurring visions, and then he gets more information about the Knight's Radiant from the woman the woman Shardbearer who heals him. And
Yeah, yeah.
I want to read that quote here for you. "It is our duty and our privilege," the woman said, "to stay vigilant for the desolation. One kingdom to study the arts of war, so that the others might have peace. We die that you may live. It has ever been our place. Every pasture needs three things," the woman said, voice changing as if she were quoting from memory: "flocks to grow, herdsmen to tend, and watchers at the rim. We of Alethala are those watchers, the warriors who protect and fight." That's not what the Knights Radiant are remembered for. In the present time, the Knights Radiant are mystical beings of the past, but in this vision, the Knights Radiant are definitely being shown in a good light.
Definitely.
So, however he's getting these visions, whoever's giving it to him, is definitely trying to let him know that the Knights Radiant are good.
Yeah, very good. I mean, and it makes me wonder back in this time what they're up against. We still don't really know what these midnight essence where they came from. So they definitely needed these superpowers almost, I imagine, to combat that. I think another thing, kind of with the snap back to reality at this at the end of this chapter, Dalinar wakes up and he's in his bed, and everyone is like there, kind of like really worried and like holding him and stuff. And then he kind of wakes up and he's like, "Oh, I'm fine. Like, don't worry. Like, I'm awake now. I'm conscious. It's all good. Relax." And I immediately thought of how it would be to be in someone else's perspective that was there, like worried because he's like shouting in his sleep, and like struggling and stuff. And then he's like, "Okay, I'm good." Like,
Yep.
like
Just
this guy is
snaps out of it.
actually crazy. Like they had to think Dalinar is going mad.
Yep.
I mean, he wakes up and he's fine. He's normal, good old Dalinar Kholin. But that's got to be super scary. And like we've mentioned in the past, I feel like people are gonna start to think he's gone mad, and gone insane, and that um, he'll lose some of the esteem that he's accrued as a warrior over the years.
I was a little worried throughout the chapter because I kept thinking back to because we as the reader we know of course that Dalinar is in this vision. In reality, he's in the barracks with Renarin, right? Renarin is there with him.
Yep.
I was worried throughout the whole chapter that as he's killing these Midnight Essence, I was really hoping he wasn't actually like killing soldiers in the barracks where he's at. Because I imagine him, enacting this whole thing in the barracks, and they're just trying to get away from him or restrain him or whatever. I was really worried he was going to come out of it and Renarin was going to be hurt or something like that. So I was really grateful that wasn't the case. I was a bit worried for him.
He did also, if you remember at the beginning of the vision, try to summon his shard blade out of reflex.
Oh yeah,
And it didn't
yeah,
come. So if he had actually
yeah.
summoned his shard blade back in the barracks, that could have been really
That'd
bad.
have been bad.
Yep.
Speaking of summoning a shard blade, I thought it was interesting that the the woman, like the innocent woman at the start of his vision,
Taffa?
yes, she gave like a measurement in heartbeats, which I thought was interesting. I guess
Yes,
they
she
just
did.
kind of that's just kind of how they do it. She was like, that was only 3 heartbeats. I don't know, something like that. And I thought that was really interesting. I guess even back then or and stuff, they just like measured time almost in heartbeats,
Yep.
which is really interesting to me.
I noticed that as
I
well.
didn't catch that. That's really interesting.
She does
Yeah.
give him, yeah, I don't remember the exact quote, but
That was just a matter of a few heartbeats or
yep.
something.
Oh, yeah, so
Hmm.
Dalinar beats up the two Midnight Essences in the shack, and she's like, "How did you do that? That was within a few heartbeats." And she's, yeah, that was, I noticed that too.
Interesting.
Speaking of getting a blast from the past, chapter 20 is a very quick snip of Kaladin's past. It's a very short chapter. However, it's one of my favorite chapters of young Kaladin because it's heartbreaking, but it really highlights who Kaladin is. He's there trying to help this 5-year-old girl who just fell, and he's really trying to do the right thing, and he fails. And that is Kaladin in a nutshell. He is in the right place at the right time, trying to do what's right, trying to save Sen at in chapter 1. Set, what's his?
Yeah.
Oh, in chapter 1,
Yep.
yes, I believe so.
He's trying to do what's right, and it never quite works out. This is classic Kaladin, if you will.
It's always so close. I think the most memorable thing from this chapter for me, or something that I really pulled out, was talks about him trying to help, and it says that his tourniquet slipped. Like he couldn't get the tourniquet to be tight enough to stop the blood flow, right?
Right.
So he asked for like cloth because it said the tourniquet would slip, but his fingers did not. And I thought that was a really interesting little notion because he had the innate, I guess, skill or knowledge of where to pinch to stop the blood flow. But not he was very young in this, and he did not have the, I guess, skill set um, to like tighten the tourniquet enough. And I thought that was like a good showing of his old self and almost like what drove him to become great at many things, or at least well skilled, whether that be in fighting or you know healing, um, and such. Because I mean, he was very beaten up. You could tell like emotionally in this chapter. He was very upset that he could not save uh, the girl's life, and it really um, did a number to him.
Yeah. Kaladin tries so hard, which which makes this chapter even more gut-wrenching for me in the fact that he cares so much, but he still fails at the end of the day, which then leads to the somewhat calloused but very logical quote that we get from his father Lirin, where he tells Kaladin, "You have to learn when to let go and stop caring." And it's a very harsh thing to say, which I guess fits in with the character we've started to learn about of who Lirin is, the very logical, the very scientific person who's looks at this as A or B, and you've lost this person. There's nothing you can do. You have to stop caring. But Kaladin's a lot more emotional than that. Kaladin can't get past that easily.
We've heard a line. It was I don't remember specifically where it was, but he was doing a bridge run, and he's still shocked to, or when he loses someone, I believe he's trying to help uh, the bridgeman that we talked about last episode, and that he dies in front of him, and he still has that moment of shock and pain of losing someone, and he references Lirin telling him, "You'll grow out of that," and it's something he's never grown out of. That he is always shocked to lose someone and disappointed in himself that he didn't save them, and he's never grown out of it.
I thought that was a really good point, because Lirin, his father, always kind of made these generalizations of things that he's felt in the past and how he would try to sympathize with Kaladin. But it's not exactly the fit for Kaladin, and I think this is a really good example of that because um, Lirin, I basically alludes that he once felt that way and once felt terrible, like mourning at the loss of someone he tried to help, right? But later, kind of grew numb to it. Um, but Kaladin has kind of shown that that hasn't gotten better for him, which I think is an interesting, that he's not just the same as his father, even though he learns a lot from him growing up. We see Kaladin at this young age learning a lot about just kind of the heartaches of life. We also see that in the next chapter with Sylphrena, and this is one of my favorites. I always love the Sylphrena conversations, but her whole notion of how do you know someone is mad, or why do men lie? It was a really interesting notion and brought up a lot of interesting conversations. I thought one thing really interesting. She says, if everyone's mad, then the one who's not mad is seen as mad, right? And I thought that was like kind of funny, and she just has a very different, because she's so new to all these, I guess, advanced concepts. She has a very odd outlook on things, and it kind of makes you think. And I really like that Brandon Sanderson kind of uses that naivete to touch a lot of subjects.
I think it's one of those cases of the wisdom of a child, if you will. The child, the innocent personality, in this case Syl, just is asking an honest question about something that doesn't make sense, and it sparks this whole philosophical discussion about what is madness, and is madness just a comparison to the norm, or is it something more than that? And Kaladin kind of gives her an answer to her specific question about madness. And I don't know that Kaladin's fully convinced in his answer. He seems a little hesitant, but I think that I definitely don't agree with the definition that Kaladin gave. Kaladin defined madness for her as the person that stands out of from the crowd, the person that's different. And Syl's like, "Well, did you just vote on it?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, basically, I guess." And I I think madness definitely is a bit more than that. I think Kaladin's oversimplifying it a little bit. I think that there's some measurable things that you can do to tell if someone is going mad, like their ability to use logic or reasoning, and you can clinically diagnose someone with those kinds of things if they're irrational, kind of whatnot. But I can see where Kaladin was going with that discussion. But I think Syl doesn't really quite take his answer uh, for what it's worth either. It's a big question, philosophical question for sure.
And kind of a difference, like you said, with Kaladin's definition of madness. It almost implies that there's always someone that's mad. Kind of like the outlier is mad.
Yeah,
Rather than madness as, I mean, no one could have it in this particular group, or
right.
there could be multiple people who, just like you said, lack reasoning or like rational thinking and such, which is interesting.
But then it leads to, I don't know, maybe my favorite moment of this chapter was just the ironic comment of that he has that I mentioned before with my word for the chapter of madness, whereas he's kind of wrapping up the conversation and he basically says, and by the way, Sil, you're making me look mad because because I'm talking to no one. Which I thought about as he was having that conversation of him just walking back and forth, just talking to his plank. Like that's what everyone else is gonna think he's doing, is
Yep.
just talking to this log that he's carrying. Yeah, that's definitely gonna make you look crazy, man.
I would just like to interject here that by Kaladin's definition of madness, Dalinar, as opposed to the other High Princes, is mad because he is the only one following the codes, and so he's the odd one out. So
He's the outlier.
everyone thinks Dalinar is going mad from a clinical perspective, but by Kaladin's
Yep.
definition, Dalinar already is mad.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that definitely is interesting.
I thought it was really interesting that Syl knew who Dalinar was. That kind of caught me off guard
Yeah.
because it was already surprising earlier in the book that she knew Kaladin's name or that she had a name and such. But I kind of just left it as between them two. Other people were kind of. She did remember who Gaz was,
Mm-hmm.
but that was a little more relevant because he's right there. She's seen Gaz. She knows who he is, but she's heard the mention of Dalinar, and I was honestly really surprised to see that mentioned in chapter 21. But she heard it, overheard the other bridge members talking about him. But like I mentioned before, it kind of showcased how Dalinar is well known as. It was in the discussion, right, about um, all men lie, and she says that Dalinar doesn't lie, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yep.
Um, which is interesting. Like even she knows that Dalinar is this upright, humble, and honest man. And also, we see that um, Kaladin may appear mad to most of his bridge crew, but not to all of them. We see with Rock, who can apparently see Syl, which kind of blew my mind out of the water. Um, and as well as Teft, who kind of comes around. He's not on board to begin with, but he comes around at the end with a little convincing, which is interesting. So, what are y'all? I want to know what your thoughts are on Rock and what's going on here, because there's a lot more than meets the eye, and I did not suspect that at all.
Yeah, what is up with that? I too was kind of shocked when Rock said he could see Syl, and he has like a name for it. He rattles off a couple words in what I'm assuming is his own language or a different language, and he when they press him and ask him, well, how can you see him? And he says, I am this word, and I'm assuming his language, and doesn't explain that at all. And it's just like, wait, what? Hold on a second. Tell me more.
Rock knows something is up because if you remember, uh, he thanks Kaladin for saving his life because Kaladin took his spot in the bridge crew.
Yep.
Or in the bridge run, and Kaladin smirks at that logic. He's like, "No, I survived. If you were standing right there, you would have survived too." And Rock's like, "No, no, 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 no. If I was standing there, I would have died. Because you were standing there, you lived, and I lived because I was at the back." And that's when he mentions Syl. He's like, "By the way, and yeah, you've got your spren following you everywhere." And Kaladin's like, "Wait, what? You can see her.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rock knows something's up.
I cannot wait. That raised a lot of questions for me. I really want to know more about Rock. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if maybe all horn eaters are this way. I'm assuming not. I'm assuming Rock has some kind of special background. And he, I don't know, enlightened or something of the sorts. I was very surprised because I kind of blew him off as the brute, big, strong me smash,
Yep.
and did not expect him to be. He seems to be about the most like educated amongst them, I guess, in this sort of thing, in this bridge crew. He knows a lot that no one else knows about. As we saw with his name, he made his name Rock because it's what the it's what they could say instead of his like 30 character name, um, which is
And then he
interesting.
keeps referring to Kaladin with this term, airsick lowlander, which I'm trying to figure that out, what that tells us about Rock. And the only thing I can guess is Rock are horn eaters or from some kind of highland where he's referring to the rest of them as lowlanders? Like, is he from the mountains or something like that, where he's referring to them like this? Because he rattles it off a couple different times, and I can't quite figure out what he's talking about.
Yeah, he does refer to. He refers to everyone actually as Airsick Lowlander, but uh, you've only heard uh, you've only heard him talk to Kaladin so far. So
Right.
and we can highlight Teft here real quick. Teft is very skeptical of everything. He's definitely not quite on board, quite as on board as Rock is at the end of the chapter, but he's certainly willing to help Kaladin in whatever they're about to do. The reader doesn't know yet. Um, but yeah, Rock and Teft are not completely beaten down. They obviously have both interesting pasts that have led them here. I think they're both pretty different pasts from each other, and they didn't know each other before this chapter. Kaladin forgets that none of the bridgemen really take the time to get to know each other like he has with each of them, and he's taken aback that, oh yeah, they don't know each other. That it's just another highlight of how low these bridgemen are.
That's
I thought
true.
this was a big moment. I thought this was really big because we've seen over the last couple chapters, Kaladin is working really hard to try and inspire these bridgemen to care about their lives, to awaken from the despair and not even caring anymore. And finally he's managed to awaken a little something in both Rock and Teft. And Teft specifically doesn't even have any faith in himself. There's a little discussion they have where Teft is talking about keeping your word or keeping your honor or something like that. And Kaladin says, well, I'm not going to break my word to you. And Teft says, no, you're not going to break your word to me. I'm going to break my word to you. And it just shows that Teft has no confidence in himself at all. But Kaladin shows a little bit of confidence in him. And that gives him just enough of an oomph for Teft to say, all right, fine, I'm in. Let's do something. I thought that was pretty big.
It's true. It gave me some insight as to what Tef's past might be like. It makes me think that he was probably like an honorable, good man, and maybe made like a mistake that he can't quite forgive himself for.
Hmm.
It kind of gives me that avenue of thought, that he can't quite trust himself, and he's afraid to, I guess, to serve alongside someone again. I also wanted to touch briefly. I can almost see some similarities between Teft and Yalb. Actually, I just thought about this, and almost that. So I talked about Yalb as being an awkward, like a neutral character. So I feel like you could see Rock as a good character. He's hasn't ever been like upset that we've seen, or that he seems like a very positive, good character, and he offers to share his food. to help the injured. Teft doesn't want to share his food, but he doesn't mind working and helping because he knows it's a good cause and such. He has that good nature, but he's also timid about it. It's just kind of a neutral back and forth, and he's not really super far on one side. I feel like, and I feel like that's kind of the input that Yalb had um, in the Shalon chapters, was that he was helpful, but different, very different, and not always upright means of helping. A little bit of cheating and such. So it's almost like that, but on another side, where it is like good means, but uh, not fully good, as maybe Kaladin or Rock would seem.
Okay. Good thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. A gray character for sure.
My
Yeah.
biggest question going into the next several chapters is definitely about Rock. I'm really excited. That really did surprise me because I just thought he was generic big strong guy, a bitch crew.
He does seem like he could be a really cool character. I do hope they develop him more and we get to see more of Rock. Or Numu Huku Akalami, whatever the rest of that name is.
Numu Huku Laka Maki Ana Luna more.
Nailed it.
That
Something
one.
like that. Yep. Perfect.
Paul, at the very end of this outline here, you said I have a prediction about Kaladin. Would you like to?
I did see that.
Would you like to close us out with this?
I do remember this. Okay. So it's not a super story inducing prediction. I guess it could be. So it mentions Gaz mentions to Kaladin about being strung up, which being strung up is they tie you outside during a high storm to let God judge your fate.
The
If you live through the
Stormfather.
yes, the Stormfather. Uh, if you live, then I guess the Stormfather wanted you to live because you didn't die to the storm. And if you die, which it sounds like Kaladin says it's basically just a death sentence. Um, my guess is that Kaladin is going to get in trouble and he is going to get strung up at some point and he's going to live. And then he's going to kind of gain reverence from people around him because, whoa, he lived, he got strung up, and the Stormfather, I guess, deemed him worthy of living forward or further.
I really like that. I hope that happens. And I think it could even tie into my theory from last episode where I theorized that Kaladin was using the Stormlight unknowingly from his spheres to help power him. Maybe that ability helps him survive the high storm that he gets strung up in. I think we're on the same page here, Paul.
I didn't think about that until you just mentioned it, but maybe he like channels some form of energy from the high storm itself. That would be really cool. I would pay to watch that, like that'd be really cool. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting predictions. All right.
But
I am going to cut us off here because we could keep talking about these, but I think we need to
really excited to go forward.
Push it till the next episode. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Elliot.
Until next time.